Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started about 1 minute. About 1 minute, everybody. Thank you.
No. They don't have time. They're permitted. They were issued. They don't have a made up permit. They were issued a consent order by ADEQ. Exactly, and that consent order gave them two choices. Submit an application or operate under these very strict standards. They chose to operate under very strict standards. The very first time that they were inspected, they failed. And that's why ADEQ shut them down, because they failed under conservation standards. So then they went.
All right, good evening again, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Darren Sweet, and I'm the Community Engagement Facilitator here with the Department of Environmental Quality, and I'm going to be facilitating the meeting tonight. So we're really glad that you're here. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and evening to come with us. And we have problems with it. Well, might just have to do with that technology. It's a beautiful thing, right? So anyways, we want to let you know this meeting is hybrid. So hello and good evening to our online participants. Now we ask that our online participants, because that's all we have participants that are online, we'd ask to just kind of keep the room quiet. And for those who are tuning in online, thank you so much. So that they can hear. So we have a camera right over there. So thank you for that. But please let us know if you're having any kind of trouble using the question tool, and that's for our online folks right there. That's a question tool. Okay, so this meeting is also being recorded on our ADEQ YouTube channel. It's going to be uploaded for viewing later, so if you'd like to take a look at that, you certainly can. Now, this is really important, everyone. We want to go ahead and clarify that this is an informal community meeting, and it's not a formal public hearing. Okay. And also we also want to clarify this is not the official time for submitting any formal public comments. So we appreciate your participation in that. Thank you to everybody, by the way, who submitted questions online ahead of this meeting. We had over 50 questions. And we tried to do our best to answer those in our presentation this evening, which we'll have a little bit later. Just to give you the purpose of this meeting is to provide information updates about ADEQ's preliminary investigation, or what we call PI report, for the 6th Street and Birch Street site performed under the Water Quality Assurance Revolving Fund, or we call it WARF, in the Cottonwood area. Now, that report can be viewed on ADEQ's website at that link. So if you want me to leave that up for a second, if you'd like to take your phone out, you can do it. That information is also available, I believe, on the table as well. And you can go back and you can get that. But I'll leave that up just for a second if you'd like to take a picture of that. Okay, so I want to acknowledge the city of Cottonwood for helping us to set up this meeting. We really appreciate us having this out. And we'd like to acknowledge any elected officials. I know we have ADEQ, who is our Yavapai County Supervisor. Thank you for being here. Do we have any other elected officials with us tonight? Who do we have? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Mayor Shaw for being here with us today.
One more, Darren. More.
What? Oh, please. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate everybody's time, especially when you do meetings at dinner time, right? Right. Let's talk a little bit about our agenda tonight. I'm going to review it, kind of the meeting structure for this evening before we get started. So we're going to have 2 presentations tonight. The first one's going to provide an overview of ADEQ activities in the Cottonwood. And then the second one's going to provide updates on the preliminary investigation report that we were talking about. Now, we aim to have these presentations done by 7 p.m. And then the rest of the meeting, what we're going to do is going to consist of an open house format. And then you're going to be able to have your questions answered and you can discuss those. And we're going to have some folks in the back and you'll be able to go over to those tables to discuss those questions with them. It's going to be very similar to what we did in, who many people were here in September 2024? Okay, it's going to be very similar to that. Thank you. Now, we encourage you to stop by each of the tables following the meeting to have a conversation with our subject matter experts who are in attendance tonight. We have staff from ADEQ. We also have staff from the Arizona Department of Health Services. Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate that very much. In the city of Cottonwood, of course, we have our folks from that facility, and they'll be available following the presentations. Now, for our online and in-person participants, there's going to be a slide up at the end of the final presentation, and that's going to contain information for any additional questions that you may have. Okay? And we kindly ask that you hold any questions that you have until the open house portion of the meeting, and then we're going to wrap this all up around 8 o'clock. Just a little housekeeping item before we get started tonight. If you didn't have a chance to sign in at the table as you came on, we do have the sign-in code right here. If you would like to sign in using your phone, please do that. If not, you can go back over there and scan it in as well, and you can get that done. We'll also have a meeting announcement. That's also located out there if you'd like to take a look at that. We do have business cards on the tables as well in back, so if you'd like to grab some of those. And again, if you walked in, you might have saw that's the place where you went ahead, you signed in, and you got all that information. But we'll also have information on those back tables over there. So that's kind of how we have our subject matter extras will be in the back tables following the presentation. Also, the restrooms, if you just step out to my right, your left, and that's going to be the restrooms are right there. There's also drinking fountains in there as well. And if for any reason we have an emergency, please just make your way calmly out that doors over here to my left, your right. And there's also a water fountain in the hall in case you need that. So I just wanted to go over something called tips for good meetings. We find these helpful when we're talking about doing meetings. First of all, we want you to share from your experience and perspective. Also, please listen when others are speaking. We also want to allow a space for all participants. Please help make sure everyone has a chance to speak with staff during that open house, okay? Be generous. We want to have the open to the community input. We ask that you do the same for us. We want to hear what you have to say, and we want you to hear what we have to say as well. We ask that all present be respectful and kind, and we believe that this will lead to a really good meeting outcome. Now, any off-topic comments or questions will be parked and followed up at a later time if appropriate. Oh, and please silence any electronic devices. If you would please just turn those on mute. We appreciate that as well. Now, if you're virtual, please avoid sending any questions via the chat feature, but rather wait till the final slide and then route them to the appropriate staff via email. And do, however, let us know if you are unable to hear or see us online. Please let us know, and we'll try to address that as well. Okay, just wanted to talk a little bit about some staff today. We've got a lot of staff here from ADEQ. I just kind of want to let you know who they are and what their roles are with us here today. Now, we have Julie Remschneider, who is our Waste Programs Director. Julie, say hello. That's Julie right there. Thank you, Julie. We have Tina LePage, and Tina is the manager of our remedial project section in the Waste Programs Division. There she is. Thank you so much. We have Dr. Hazel Cox, and Dr. Cox is going to be one of our presenters, and let me give you just a little quick bio on her. She's a senior hydrogeologist in the remedial project section in the Waste Division's program. Now, she has worked on the state Superfund side for over 12 years with ADEQ. And that's dealing with contaminated soil and groundwater site investigations and cleanup. Now, Dr. Cox did get her PhD focusing on contaminated transport in the environment from the University of Arizona in 2012. Thank you, Dr. Cox, for being here. We also are going to have Dan Stoll. Thank you. We have Dan. Dan, go ahead and stand up. Say hello. Dan is a principal hydrogeologist with the Waste Division's program, and he joined ADEQ in 2020. In this role, he provides technical support and peer review for the work programs. And he has specific experience in the geology and hydrology of the Cottonwood area right here that he's worked on Highway 260 on that wharf site since 2017. Thank you so much, Dan, for presenting tonight. We also have Lauren Hillebrand. Lauren is our community liaison for the Northwest Arizona at ADEQ. She has worked in various environmental and developmental roles across Arizona prior to joining ADEQ in 2023. And a special big shout out to Lauren because she works tirelessly to get these meetings going and to talk to you all. And so she's very involved. I want to say special thanks so much, Lauren, for being and doing this with us tonight. We also have Justin Harris. Justin is the Community and Intergovernmental Engagement Section Manager. Thank you, Justin. As you came in this evening, I'm not sure if she's still sitting out there or where she went, but Melissa Hayes, and Melissa is our community engagement planner. She works with our section. I think she may still be out there, but she's with us tonight. We also have Lynn Grego. Lynn, where are you? There he is. He's our ombudsman and tribal liaison for ADEQ. So thank you, Lynn, for being here. Shay Sorensen, our Deputy Air Quality Public Information Officer. Yeah, Shay, there's Shay right there. We also have Balaji Vaidyanathan, see if I got that right, Balaji. He is our Air Quality Facilities and Mission Control Section Manager. Raise your hand, Balaji. Thank you very much for being here. And from our Administrative Council, we have Eddie Slade and Matt O'Donnell. There they are right there. Say hi, guys. Thank you very much. And last but not least, we have Daniel Tikolowski, who's our Air Quality Division Director. Thank you, Daniel, for being here. Okay, everybody, I'm going to come back over after the presentation's over, but I want to hand this over to Lauren right now, and she's going to take us through the next part of our presentation. Thank you so much, everyone.
Can you guys hear me okay? Do I need to speak up? Probably, let's see. How about now? Is that better? Okay. Before we got started tonight to get into the meat and potatoes and how Hazel and Dan break down the PI report, we wanted to go over for maybe some of you that may be joining us for the first time this evening, some of the activities that ADEQ and others have been doing in Cottonwood. So many of you guys may be familiar with this webpage already, but we do have a facility of interest webpage for all the work that we're doing here in Cottonwood. There is the link for that right there, and also on that webpage, there's a little box just like this one where you can subscribe to receive updates. So any new reports we have, any new meeting announcements, things like that. Make sure you're subscribed on our website to have the latest and greatest information from us. And it has all of this information as well on there, but just quickly before we got started, we felt it might be beneficial to just kind of review where we're at with some of our work that's going on in air quality. So back in September of 2023, Minerals Research Inc., or MRI, was issued a notice of violation. And then in October 2023, entered into a consent order where one of those requirements was to submit a permit application within a certain time frame. So they submitted for an individual air quality permit application. More details and fun information on that can be found on the webpage, but in October of 2023 as well. Then in December of 2023, we began some air monitoring at the VFW and Kids Park, where that report's available. It became available in September 2024 when we came back last year to talk to you guys for some heavy metals and particulate matter or dust. So that's also available on that webpage. And then we also began air monitoring again at the VFW for lead specifically in December of last year, and that's still ongoing. But we'll make sure to share and communicate that with you guys once that's available via email. And then here is just a picture of some of our staff and volunteers that have been out here in Cottonwood for, I guess, basically the last year or so, helping to change out the filters and get that data for these reports and for you guys. And then some other, last slide for me. And so last little bit of information, we do have the Arizona Department of Health Services here, and they're also doing some work here in Cottonwood. So feel free to chat with them during the open house about their work, the public health assessment that they're going to be using a lot of our data to perform. And then also the University of Arizona is conducting a study where active community members are also welcome to participate in that. And we can put you in touch with the University of Arizona if you're interested in being part of that program as well. And we'll get to the good stuff now. So I'll pass it over to Hazel and Dan. And if you guys have any questions about where we're at with air quality items, feel free to chat with us after the meeting.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I'm Dan, as you heard. My role at the agency is as the senior peer reviewer for all the programs in WARP. So can you hear me okay? Somebody's doing better. I review all the technical issues in the WARP program and provide technical assistance to Hazel and other folks. So I'm really glad to be here tonight to get involved in this project. I've been in the sidelines, so I'm happy to be here. Why don't we jump in? What I want to start with is what we want to accomplish tonight, and we've hinted a little bit at that. We want to bring you all up to date on the status of our preliminary investigation. I want to stress we're not done. We're not final yet. This is kind of phase one of the preliminary investigation. I want to talk a little bit about what our regulatory authority is out here to make sure we're all clear on what the ADEQ can and cannot do. I want to take a moment. We want to acknowledge the questions that we did receive online. We tried to weave a lot of those in tonight. Some of them weren't appropriate, but we'll get answers out to all of those, and quite a few of them we'll address today as we go on. And again, I want to emphasize, we haven't made any decisions about the site yet. Hazel and I are the science people, the technical people, and we aren't ready to draw conclusions yet, and we want to be very clear on that. Why don't we jump ahead? The WARP program is the Water Quality Assurance Revolving Fund. That's the equivalent, that's our state Superfund program, if you know EPA. We're responsible for soil, water, surface water, waste, and things like that. We are created by statute in the state of Arizona. That's where we get our regulatory authority, and we are regularly audited by the legislature and the governor to make sure we are meeting our statutory authority, not going beyond our statutory authority, and also to find out what changes need to be made in the statutes as time goes on. So we're in constant interaction with the government, and that's where we get our authority, and that's the basis for what we do. Now, we do cleanups in Arizona for orphan sites. We have about 35 orphan sites across the state. We also oversee privately funded efforts. So if a company wants to do their own cleanup, we can help them with that under our rules and statutes. And what we're talking about tonight is a preliminary investigation. That's our initial tool for identifying if a site should get on the WARF list, whether it should be listed as an official WARF site. It's a screening level investigation. It's not meant to be final. It's kind of a go, no go on whether we should proceed into the WARF program. So that's where we're ultimately going to go with this PI. We're kind of at the midpoint, but that's what we're going to talk about. I talked a little bit about our regulatory authority. As I said, we have standards for soil, groundwater, surface water. What we do in the WARF program is separate from what the air permit folks do. We're the same agency, but we have different statutory requirements. We want to emphasize that, and your people are here tonight. And finally, dust is an issue out here. We all know that. The Department of Health Services is here tonight. They have guidance for dealing with indoor dust. Indoor dust is not defined as soil, water, or surface water in our statutes, so that's, you probably all heard, we have limited ability to deal with indoor dust. So ADHS is here tonight. So with that, let me turn it over to Hazel. She'll give you a little bit, just get us started on the investigation.
Good evening, everyone. I'll give you just a second to adjust to my accent. I'm from Southern Arizona, as you can tell maybe from my accent. So the site location, I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but just in case some of you aren't, we're located basically right in the middle of Cottonwood here. There's Mingus Street to the north, there's 89A to the south, Main is just off to the east here, and the slag pile from the historical smelter is located right by the Verde Valley Fairgrounds. The main wind direction in the area, as again, I'm sure most of you are aware, living here, goes to the northwest and the southeast, going up and down the valley. So the site was referred to the WARF program in December 2023, and we started looking into the history of the area to figure out what was going on. Why was there a giant slag pile in the middle of Cottonwood? Well, there was a giant slag pile because this former smelter was located right in that area, and then it operated from the 19-teens up to the 1930s, and then was shut down and demolished, and the town of Cottonwood kind of grew up around the area. Then, of course, we have minerals research who has been recently reprocessing that slag for upcycling. So this was some of the information we were able to find on the layout of the former smelter. So we have the main operations area here. This is 6th Street. And then there's the machine shop, which is now the Verde Valley Senior Center. There's some of the other buildings that still exist. The strip mall down here used to be the former ore bins for the smelter. And then we have some residences along here that were residences associated with the workers at the smelter. One of the main points of interest for us was this former smelter stack was located up on the top of that hill that's south of 89A, up by where the church is now. And we found there used to be conveyors that took the ore up to the smelter stack, and then other conveyances that took the slag back down. And so we don't know the exact path it took after crossing what is now 89A, but it obviously made it over to this area where the slag pile was.
Where did the ore come from?
Where did the ore come from? The ore came from mines in Jerome and Clarkdale. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dan to talk about some of the methods we used.
Yeah, I get the boring slides with lots of words. So we've used two different kinds of analytical methods out here to study this. Some of you may have heard of this One is called XRF. It stands for X-ray fluorescence. That's a tool that's hand operated in the field. It's designed to analyze the sample very quickly. And what it does is it scans the surface of the soil or the mineral, or they use them for lead paint as well. It scans the surface of your sample, and using X-rays, it identifies which metals are present in that sample. You then have to convert that to a concentration because all you're measuring is the surface level. The other analytical method is the EPA method 6010D. That's the formal laboratory method where they take the whole sample. It's usually about a 4-ounce sample. They dissolve it in acid, digest it, they call it, and then they analyze that entire sample. So the gold standard in our work is the EPA sample because that's a whole sample analysis. The XRF is just a surface sample that we're assuming is uniform throughout. I should say the XRF is an EPA approved method, but it's not the final say. And the key reason is we like our laboratory samples because they come with a whole bunch of quality assurance. We can review those very carefully. We get all that documented from the lab, so we can go back and check, double check it. We can do blanks and duplicates. We do a great deal of that. So that's really our gold standard is the laboratory. Next one, please. Sorry if I'm rattling this paper. So the XRF is useful for scanning a large number of samples very quickly. That's its benefit. So what it lacks in absolute accuracy, it makes up for in speed. It allows us to make a decision in the field. If we get a hot spot here, we can do a series of what we call step-out samples to kind of zero in on that, which if we had to wait for the laboratory, it takes 2-3 weeks to get results back from the lab. So the XRF is how we can very quickly in the field get a big picture of a large area. So we did over 750 XRF samples at all these blue dots. We sent 10% of them to the lab as well. That's a standard procedure under EPA and the work program, because we always want to check the XRF against the lab to see if one's skewing high or low or whatever it is. The other reason we want to do a large number of samples was so we could get what we call a fingerprint, or we're going to call it a signal or a fingerprint tonight as we go through this. And what it is we look at all the metals that we detect, and we look using fairly sophisticated statistics, what set of metals is indicative of slag. We were looking for an indicator of slag distinct from the natural soil out there. So just like your fingerprint has a lot of different shapes and whorls, the ratio of iron to copper to zinc to arsenic, all those together give us a fingerprint of our sample. And that was a big part of our work out here so that we can start to distinguish the impact of MRI from the natural conditions out here. Jump ahead, am I still on? So as I said, while XRF helps us characterize a large number of samples, we don't use that for making final cleanup decisions or compliance decisions because it's just not that accurate. We rely on the laboratory samples because they can be reviewed and checked. They'll stand up in court, and it's what the law requires us to use for making decisions. We have to use Arizona-approved laboratories for making final decisions. What else did I want to say about this? Yeah, XRF, so what we did out here, when we looked at that 10% of lab samples, we found the XRF was consistently reading higher. So if the XRF said 57 or 60, our lab samples were coming in 30, 40, something like that. But it wasn't a real clear correlation. It was always higher with the XRF, but it wasn't consistent enough where we could simply say, oh, just divide the XRF by 3 and you'll have the right number. It wasn't statistically valid for that. And we'll talk more about that later. We put the soil rule up here, our 187204. We spend a lot of our time looking up our rules to make sure that we're following what we're supposed to be doing per the law. Where to? Oh, yeah, we threw this slide in. This is the XRF unit. It's a handheld unit. It generates X-rays. We literally set it on the ground. This is a picture from our sampling work out there. We shoot it at the ground, and in a few seconds, we get a readout. And so you can see we can do this very, very quickly and very efficiently using this instrument. These things run about 15 grand, so it's a fairly sophisticated instrument. Next. So I want to talk a little bit about, you guys have heard about this, background arsenic in Arizona. Arsenic is a natural component of the Earth's crust. And so there's an amount of arsenic naturally present in the environment. And it's arsenic and copper travel together. They're found in similar minerals. So the minerals that the copper miners want are also the minerals that contain arsenic. So Arizona, we kind of divide it into three big geological regions. There's Colorado Plateau up north. Those are the big flat-lying limestone, the big layer cake of rocks that you see in the Grand Canyon. There's the Basin and Range province down Phoenix, Tucson. That's where we have the mountains and the really deep valleys full of sand and gravel where we get a lot of our groundwater from those valley aquifers. And in between, we have what we call the transition zone. It's just because it's a transition between those two areas. The transition zone is very mountainous. It's the Bradshaw Mountains. It's the mountains we see in this area. That transition zone is also home to a lot of the copper mining and gold mining in Arizona. And a lot of the towns that exist in the transition zone were founded to support the mines and the smelting operations. So we've got Jerome and Clarkdale and Cottonwood and so on in this area. Let's go ahead. So it's real important for us to figure out what arsenic was added to the environment by the actions of a party, in this case MRI, versus what's naturally there. And this has been going on for many, many years, way back in the 80s at the beginning of Superfund, and when all these regulations were being considered, they looked at the natural arsenic in Arizona, not in mining areas, but generally across Arizona. They had numbers from very low, non-detect 0 up to 97 or about 100. And that's statewide. And there's a wide range. There's not a single number that's background. There's a wide range of concentrations present in the environment. 86, we started with an initial cleanup level of around 100. This was, again, at the very beginning of all this. A lot of the toxicology wasn't in yet. We were formulating these laws. I think WARF was formed in 86, actually. Is that when the legislation was, I think? I think so. Let's just say that for tonight, since we're on camera. 1990, we did the draft legislation was 1,000. And that was based on some really rough health-based calculations. I don't think anybody really liked that, but that was kind of what they were thinking about. Obviously, the mining companies have something to say when legislation is being formed. So what they settled on in 1990, they actually looked at the health-based level. They actually looked at the toxicology, and they looked at actual exposures, and they settled on a number of 10. Now, 10 is meant to be very conservative. When we set our standards, it's always set to be very, very conservative. The health-based level for a normal person, we all ingest soil accidentally because we eat, we put our fingers in our mouth and so on. That's the exposure that we all live with. That number is actually 1,000. That's a one in a million excess cancer risk is 1,000 parts per million. That's a pretty high number. 10 is for a child with pica. And pica is where they compulsively put things in their mouth. So that's a child who's going to have a very large dose of soil in their diet due to their behavior. So that number is very conservative from the standpoint of regular exposure. It's a much higher exposure than we would normally experience. So that's where our SRL, our soil remediation level, was set based on that very conservative level. Next. Just a little bit. So we've been cleaning up a number of towns all over the state in association with some of the mining companies and so on. Some of these are in the transition zone, some are not. And the point of this slide is just to kind of show you the kind of arsenic we see at town cleanups. These aren't background numbers. These are what we see when we go in. So in Clarkdale, we had numbers up to 595 parts per million milligrams per kilogram. We remediated, I can't remember, a large number of homes. We just finished that up in the last few weeks. Ajo, down in the south, we had concentrations in these towns of up to 1,000 milligrams per kilogram or parts per million. Bisbee, 526, Klondike, 240, Clifton, Douglas, 600, 200 to 600. So we see fairly significant numbers when we do our town cleanups. So, and we see, at a typical site, we see a lot of properties with these kind of numbers in these town cleanups. Here we haven't seen numbers like, we've seen a couple of samples like that, but we aren't seeing these really high numbers consistently across the area. So this is just for context, so you know what we've seen in other areas. Next one. Here's a little closer to home. This is in our region. So we're cleaning up the Dewey Humboldt smelter. Remember the stack? We took that down a few years ago. We've looked at over 1,000 properties out there. I'm closely involved in that. We've done a great deal of sampling. There we're settling on a background of around 90 milligrams per kilogram. They're right near the mine, and the natural geology there has quite a bit of arsenic in it. So we're looking at that kind of a range. And we're seeing numbers up to 120, so it's pretty tight. But we, there's going to be a lot of cleanup on properties there. Superior, we're working on that right now with BHP. Our average there is settling in around 86, again around 90 milligrams per kilogram. They had a smelter in that area for 100 years, same kind of thing. Clarkdale, just up the hill, we were seeing numbers up to 215. And we're seeing an average around 50. So we're seeing it between 50 to 90 in the transition zone appears to be the natural arsenic. Now this is based on a statistical analysis. This isn't just a sample or a few samples. We actually go through a very rigorous statistical process developed by the EPA for risk assessments. And this is kind of where we're at. I talked about these other numbers, Ajo up to 1,000 and so on. To jump ahead. This is a lot of data. I know that will be at the table. So if I'm talking fast, I'm trying to get this done. We're happy to answer questions and go through this with you. So what did we see? Was this mine or yours? This is mine. So what we saw, we're calling it a background screening level because it's not the real background level yet. As I said, this is our XRF. This isn't our lab validated data. But we're seeing a screening level of about 57 milligrams per kilogram based on 700, based not on the 750 samples, but on the samples we took crosswind and uphill in our background population. Similar soil, well outside the zone of impact from MRI. Now again, that's probably high because our lab samples are coming in lower than that. So it's really only a screening tool for us to relatively sort out different levels of impact across the area. What it does show is we do have some natural arsenic around here, whether it's 57 or 30 or 40, we'll find out. But we did see that well outside of the wind pattern and the dust distribution pattern for the site. And again, I just want to reemphasize XRF data are not appropriate for us to do a background calculation. A background determination is a very rigorous process where you have to meet a 95% confidence interval in your statistics. Roughly speaking, that's our threshold. So it's a very careful process. So what we've got now is kind of a preliminary idea that we're going to have a background level and we're going to have some impact as we go forward. Preliminary findings. One more thing, I'll just go through this because I get the wordy slides and Hazel gets the pictures. So arsenic was the most extensive metal we detected, along with copper, manganese, zinc, all the other elements that go together with copper mineralization. I said this a little bit before. We didn't have a strong correlation with the laboratory data, although it was consistently higher. It wasn't enough to say with statistical certainty. You can't simply do a conversion factor on the XRF. But we did find three signals. This is what Hazel's going to get into. We found, I talked about the fingerprint or the signal. We found three signals out here. We found a pretty clear signal. Again, we had 750 samples. This is a very rigorous rigorous analysis, we had a clear signal for soil that's been impacted by slag. And again, that's a mix of all the metals and how they all relate to each other. We had a different signal for background, which we again did up the hill and outside the area. And then we had another signal, and we'll talk about that, where it kind of fell in between and we couldn't really clearly say what it was. And finally, before I get to Hazel, there's no groundwater impacted by this site. Everything we've seen is just in the upper soil, as you'd expect if it's from dust deposition. And we don't have any reason to think any of this is going down through the soil. So Hazel, why don't you take us through the PI?
So I apologize, this is not showing up super well on the slide. So this is a slide showing the 3 signals that Dan was just talking about. So if it's a star, that is a sample that was statistically similar to slag. If it is red, if it's dark red star, then it's over that 57 screening level that Dan was talking about. If it is a circle, it is similar to the background area. So it was statistically connected to the background area of the site. If it is a triangle, that's that other signal. So it was over the arsenic screening level, but it did not have that slag signal. So there's some other impacts from something else, potentially the former smelter operations, potentially some other things. Arsenic's been used in multiple things throughout the years. So that's the explanation of the legend of this slide. So we noticed there were, Dan I think said 3 main clusters. There are 3 main areas where we saw slag signal. One was at the north end of the slag pile near the MRI facility. I'd like to mention this property to the west had purchased gravel from MRI to use as dust suppression on their property. So it was unsurprising that we saw slag signal on the property that had put slag gravel down. Then we had another area more to the north along the police property and along Aspen. And then another area down at the former stack, the smelter Stack Hill area. And that's unsurprising. Like I said earlier, that's where the slag was generated. So it's unsurprising again to see any kind of signal down there. I have a few points that are scattered around, and I'll talk more about those when I talk about the follow-up sampling.
Did you mention the playground just?
Yes, so the kids' park is located here. We had one sample come back over the arsenic screening level, but it did not have the slag signal. And we will be going back to take samples in that area. I'll get to that when we get to that slide.
Printouts of this one in the back.
Yes, we have printouts of this one on the back table. If you guys want to come and take pictures of those. This is also in the PI report that is on that website, so you can have your own copy. Also, there are 2 things, there's one thing I wanted to mention that's relevant to our follow-up sampling. There are 2 main stormwater pathways that we observed while we were out doing the sampling. It did rain while we were out there. There's one that goes along Aspen and then off to the north that way. And then there's a wash that runs to the south of the site that runs to the east under Main this way. I think that was everything. Oh yeah, just wanted to mention the background samples are not shown on this. They are off to the south and west along, I believe Mingus goes that way and then turns and goes along past the airport, and they were out to the east and west of that road out there. Oops. Can't get better help these days. So yeah, as I was saying, the slag signal was identified in, they were actually identified in 76 of the XRF samples that were collected. And that gave us then the background, the analysis of the background area gave us the background screening level of 76 milligrams per kilogram. And we do need to do additional sampling in background areas as well to come up with the actual background for arsenic in the area. And 48 of those 60, my dyslexia is kicking in. 48 of those 76 XRF samples were over that screening level. And then 30 of the samples without the slag signal were also at the screening level. And because that's a lot of numbers,
For the visual
for the visual learners, this is the summary. So there were 704 samples in the town site area. The other 65 were in the background area. So these are the samples in the town site. Of those, we had the ones with the slag signal in, the 76. Of those, 48 were over the background screening level. That's what BSL is. And 30 of them were over the background screening level but didn't have the slag signal. But just a summary of what I just said. So what maybe people are more interested in right now is what are we doing next? So like I said, we're going back to those areas that were indicated as being over that screening level, and we're doing laboratory analysis sampling. And aluminum will be included. It was one of those metals that was indicated that should have been on the first round of sampling, and it was inadvertently left off. So there were 10 areas talked about in the PI report. No, go back. I'm not done. And some of them are kind of together, and I'll talk about them on the next slide as you just got spoiled to see. Then, yeah, so we're also going back to background areas, and we're also seeking out, we're going to a new background area that we found that's further away from Cottonwood itself, but still in the same geologic materials, to make sure that we really do have what's background for this site. And then the PI report addendum will be put together with all of this information and released to the public once we have finished that information. And the timing on this, we are starting Monday to come out and collect the follow-up samples. So we will be back here next week. I will be here Monday and Tuesday. If you want to come and say hello while I'm in the field. We'll be collecting the samples starting next week. It will take us probably 3 weeks to collect all the samples because it's not an XRF, it's just a quick, shoot the ground with it. We have to be sure we're collecting the soil samples in the right places and everything. So then it will be another probably 2-3 weeks to get the lab results back. So we're looking at late April. And then we have to do the statistical analysis on those data. So we're looking at summer before we can see that PI report addendum. And that will include decisions at the site. So we will have made the determinations of what needs to be done for the PI for the site. Yes. So those 10 areas. I'm going to go over the 6 areas that were pulled out in the PI report as having the slag signal. The first is, as I said, immediately north of the slag pile here. We're going to be going back and delineating this area to see how far that slag signal goes out. The second area is the police station property and along Aspen Street, and also going a little bit along that stormwater pathway to the north. The third area is the Smelter Hill Stack. I keep doing that. Smelter Stack Hillside, where a lot of that area is actually pretty inaccessible to people. It's very steep and kind of treacherous. So there were some areas we couldn't actually reach to sample. So we're going to be focusing on those areas that people can reach. We're going to be looking, we did sample with XRF around the church and didn't see around the property, around the parking lot, and didn't see an issue there. We are still going back to around the parking lot to make sure that there is no issue there with the lab samples. And then along 89A, there's a couple of tracks that people seem to walk on. We're going to be sampling along there to see what people might be being exposed to. Then fourth area, we have one random dot out here on, this is Willard Street. And it is also surrounded by the non-slag signal metals of arsenic above the screening level. So we're going to be going all the way along that area with lab samples as well, trying to delineate what's going on over there. So that's 4 and 9. And then the fifth one is to the south of the pile here. I did find some historical photos that showed the pile used to extend down to this area. So this might just be from residuals left over from where they scraped that back when they developed that area. But we will still be going back there and sampling and seeing what's going on. Then 5 and 6, again, co-located areas. The PI report called them out in different sections, but they're right next to each other, so it'll be one area we're investigating. We have one signal with the slag and one signal without the slag. So this is right next to that wash that drains to the south. So we're going back to that and we're going into the wash and sampling to see if there is an issue over there or if that was some weird XRF abnormality. So we will know once we get that. Then the 8th area is down here south of the former smelter stack hill. Get that the one way around. We had multiple samples with above the screening level, not slag signal, and then a couple of slag signals that weren't above the screening level, but we're going back there to check that out. And last but definitely not least, as I said, we're going back to the kids park, and then we'll probably actually be starting there. We won't be going in order. We'll be probably starting in the kids park to see what's going on in this area and make sure that everything is safe over there.
About that big blank area just east of the pile?
For the big blank area just east of the pile, we're currently working with property owners in the areas that you have. We have some blanks where we weren't able to collect the initial screening samples, and we'll be going back and screening those. And then whenever we hit a sample over that screening level, we will take a soil sample right there and then and get those areas delineated as well. So I can answer your questions after the meeting. This is the last slide. So,
So where the senior center is on that map?
yes, the senior center is located right here.
We have this map back at our table.
Yes.
You can look at it, you can take a picture of it if you want.
Yes. So I can answer those types of questions back there too, but that was a simple one. So, and I think that was everything. I'm going to turn it back over to someone. Here you go. Thank you.
Thank you all. I know this is technical and I appreciate you going through this with us. It's complicated work and we were hoping part of our goal tonight is to convey that we have to do this correctly and carefully and for the law. So thanks for putting up with all those numbers.
Yes, and I just wanted to touch on all the questions that we received. Thank you guys for using that tool that we included on the meeting invite to submit questions ahead of the meeting. We had over 50 questions. We reviewed those and tried to incorporate answers to those in here without getting too technical. But if we missed any of your questions that you submitted using that tool, Hazel and Dan are happy to talk with you, I guess following this now. But thank you guys for submitting those. We appreciate it. And I'll give it to Darren to kind of close us out and explain the open house a little bit.
Thank you all so very much. Want to thank Dan and Hazel for that presentation. Thank you guys so much for doing that. As a reminder for online participants, go ahead and send questions to the following appropriate contacts, and we'll be happy to answer those following this meeting. Now, we're going to leave the screen up for the rest of the meeting, and this meeting will end at 8 p.m., so just keep that in mind. But as explained at the beginning of the meeting, go ahead and take the rest of this time. We're going to have about an hour and like 7 more minutes. Walk around the table, speak to the folks. They're going to be back at them. We've got ADEQ, and here we've got the Department of Health Services over here as well. So you can go with that and talk to them. Like Dan said, they got maps, they got all kinds of information back there. So go ahead and get them to talk to. Now, if you want to ask questions, we prefer that you just keep them kind of what the stuff we've talked about here tonight. That would be great. Some of the questions you have that may not be answered tonight, but we're going to work on them following this meeting. So if there's a question that we don't have an immediate answer to, we'll get followed up with you and get that. And once again, I just want everybody to give a big round of applause to the staff at the City of Cottonwood who have been very instrumental in planning today's event. So thank you, City of Cottonwood. Okay, welcome to all. Proceed, everybody. Thank you so much.